Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library. And today I have a special guest on that is going to talk about a technical topic that impacts just about every business that I can think of. If there is a business that exists that this topic does not impact, I have no idea what it is. So, welcome to the show, John Sukup.
Thanks for having me, Terrell. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Now, John, before we jump in to talk about, your business that is all around data, what was your background before you started your own business?
Sure. I've always been involved in data in some capacity. I started out in the consumer market research industry. So most people, they're familiar with surveys and focus groups, probably to the point where they're exhausted of getting emails about, take a quick 10-minute survey for your, $3 Starbucks card or something. But I got in that industry, uh, boy, I guess it's been about 13 years ago now. But started out because I wanted to kind of understand how people made choices, how they would choose one product over another. How companies would determine how to create products or what features to put in those products. But as I stayed in the industry longer, I came to realize that the tools that we use, like surveys and focus groups, for example, which are still kind of the bread and butter of that industry, just the data that was being collected using those approaches, at least from my perspective, was kind of suspect. It's hard for people to really put into words or answer questions about what they're going to do 6 months in the future. Are you going to buy a new refrigerator in the next 6 months? Well, maybe today I feel like I'm going to do that, but next week maybe that'll change. So right about the time that I started kind of falling, out of love with the market research industry, topics like big data were coming to the forefront of conversations up at the C-suite. And I approached some of my employers when I was in market research and said, we don't have to do surveys and focus groups anymore. We can go and find the same information that people are leaving on social media or product reviews on Amazon, and we can mine that data and extract the same information, probably with a much higher level of quality than if we were to just ask, 30,000 people in the US the same questions and spend a lot more money. But the idea was not really thought about as the direction of market research, although I think market research is very much in that direction now. So I started Expected X initially as a data-driven approach to handling market research. And as that has kind of evolved, I've kind of moved out of specifically market research, and now really just focusing on, how to basically get companies to maximize the value in the data assets that they keep, within their organization. And a lot of companies have, data that they, data that they know that they have that they use, data that they know that they have that they don't use, and data that they don't know they have that they don't use. And there's just a treasure trove of use cases, and specifically moving into things like machine learning and what people liken as artificial intelligence, are driven by those data stores. So kind of maybe that's a long-winded response to your question, but hopefully that makes sense. I'm sure we'll get into more detail as we go forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that that is a very important part of what you talked about is companies have the data already, and a lot of times they're collecting the data, and they're, I guess their focus was on, hey, we sell product A and we just want to get the cash for product A, but they don't think about all of this data that they collected in the process of selling that, or even marketing or collecting information that becomes sometimes more valuable than the product that they're selling. Because I remember when I was at General Electric, that was one of the big things that we had a discussion in the aviation division, is trying to really maximize the data around engine maintenance and, flight patterns and all of that stuff, where it was like, hey, if we don't get a whole handle on this, like somebody else will, and it will drastically change our business.
Right, right. No, absolutely. And I think that, and I hate to use, corporate jargon buzzwords or anything, but, I think at one point, companies that were comfortable working with data gave them a competitive advantage. But I think now, even in just maybe the past 5 years or so, that, just being able to be confident and have a level of data literacy, and what my organization likes to call data maturity, isn't really a competitive advantage anymore. It's table stakes. Again, there's my corporate term, but it's almost like you can't even be a business now unless you know how to work with your data and know how to maximize, that value that is inherent in that data. And I think even to the point where some organizations are able to de-identify, any personally identifiable information, PII, and resell it to third-party, data aggregators like Axiom or TransUnion or, the credit reporting agencies. So there's even a market for companies to sell their data to other organizations that other organizations can buy and link to their data. And it's just a huge ecosystem that didn't used to exist. Oh boy, like I said, maybe not even 5-10 years ago.
Gotcha. Now, why is it that you think that some companies have been able to effectively grasp the use case of data and other companies seem to be a little lagging when it comes to really understanding that?
I think it's like with most business transformation, it's a top-down approach. If there's executive leadership that is willing to, fund the research or fund the business use case for managing data, then it just trickles down through the whole organization. They're the ones steering the ship. But I think, it's if you run into a CEO that is very set in their ways, or maybe they're nearing retirement and they're kind of on autopilot, I guess. It maybe not be as much. I mean, you hear a lot about data professionals, data scientists, machine learning engineers. There's a million different terms for what those roles are. And I don't pretend to have the true definition, but the supply of people that are talented in working with data is also very low compared to the demand. So I think there could be, not only the executive leadership part, where a company is making the stand that, we're going to be a data-driven company, but I think there's also just the lack of talent, and some companies can't find these engineers that they can use to implement data strategies within their organizations. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. Most of the tools that we use in machine learning or just data management are open source, which means, there's no software licensing fees. They're driven by a community of interested individuals like myself, I suppose, that are interested in working with data. So I don't necessarily think it's the cost of the tools, but I think it's the cost of the talent, the lack of the talent, and probably also, like I said, the drive from the top of an organization is the main use case.
Gotcha. So now when we think about examples of use cases, what are some of the common examples that you've seen companies like that you've been able to help think differently about, hey, this is how you can get value out of something you already have?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the things that I always had trouble with developing Expected X from the beginning. And I'm still kind of maybe in that area too, is that, you have conversations with prospects or just, other folks that are interested in what you do. And they say, well, what industries do you work in? Do you work in retail? Do you work in manufacturing? My answer early on, and still maybe kind of to a level, is, well, every industry has data. So and a lot of, and people are asking a lot of the same questions across industries. How do I keep my customers from leaving me? How do I offer products, that that they'll buy, just like market research questions. And that doesn't matter if you're in retail, manufacturing, hospitality, airlines. Keeping your customers happy, engaged, and paying you is industry agnostic. So some of the tools that apply, and I think it's regardless again of what industry you're in, are things like customer retention models. How do I determine what patterns my customers are taking in their, the way that they interact with my company, the products that they purchase, that might be indicative that they're ready to stop purchasing my product and go to a competitor. How do we find those people, determine who they are before they make that decision, and then approach them with our marketing team, maybe coupons or some sort of offer to keep them retained. You see companies, in the banking industry, fraud detection is a big use case for working with data and machine learning. And I think pretty much everyone, I know I have several times, like it or not, gotten messages on my, on my smartphone after I made some purchase. Maybe I was on vacation and I bought a big souvenir, and, the bank comes back and says, hey, did you just spend this, amount of money, and you're in some different part of the world that doesn't match up with your typical purchase patterns. So, sending automated alerts for fraud. Again, to give another example, preventative maintenance. So like in manufacturing, when an assembly line goes down because a component of that assembly line breaks or becomes uncalibrated. I'm not sure what the right word is for that. But, when you have to shut down your production lines, time is money, right? So to be able to predict when a machine is going to require maintenance and be able to handle it before something breaks, basically to smooth out the process. To give you an actual example of a project that I worked on, and I've worked on projects like that too, but one of my favorite ones to talk about is in the energy industry. So I worked with another consultant probably about 4 years ago now, with the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy, and they were trying to predict the impact of hurricanes on the Gulf Coast, because there's like 32 or 34 oil refineries right along the Gulf Coast. So every time a hurricane comes through, they have to shut down, they have to decrease production, and then they might have to deal with the fact that their facilities could be damaged by a hurricane. So this model was essentially to determine if we could take the information provided by, the National Weather Service or other weather reporting agencies to say, hey, this is the path of the hurricane, this is the wind speed, this is the shoaling estimates on the shoreline. What's the impact going to be to our oil reserves, so we can release oil from our strategic petroleum reserve, which is located, I believe, on the Gulf Coast in Texas, in these salt caves. It's kind of interesting. But basically, how much do we release? How do we estimate the shortfall? And then how do we release a given amount so that you don't go to the gas station, after a hurricane hits and gas is, $15 a gallon. Yeah. So long story short, which I think I already made the story quite long, is that the use cases are just, they're everywhere. And they touch on a lot of different industries, regardless of what line of business you're in.
And that's something that I've seen to be consistent from my standpoint of just having to build out financial forecasts, to where being able to have access to quality data that can kind of predict, hey, where's our revenue going to be? And then based on that, we know what our expenses are going to be. So we can kind of predict, hey, this is what our profit's going to look like, or this is what our cash is going to look like, especially for businesses right now. So where cash is a very, very, very critical thing for so many businesses as they're trying to navigate that. I think being able to utilize the data to help inform them of, hey, here are the possibilities, or here's the likely outcome based on all the data points we have, it allows you to make that decision. Now, when you think about that and you think about a situation we're in now with COVID-19, to where you have such a drastic change or deviation from the normal, like, how do you think about something like that in a world where, like I said, data is your expertise? Like, how do you recommend, or have you seen any adjustments that have been a great way to approach, hey, this abnormal change in the data?
Right, right. Well, you hit on a good point there at the very beginning, talking about data quality. And we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but data quality is one of the categories that my organization addresses as part of our service offering to startups. And, you know, the quality of the data is everything, because a computer at the end of the day is dumb. You know, you can feed in any data to a computer and say, you know, and I'm making obviously oversimplifying this, but say, hey, churn out a predictive, you know, machine learning solution for whatever. And it will do it, you know, and it will create something. Now, is that something that you can actually use in the real world? Is it reflective of the reality that you're trying to model? Well, if your data quality is poor, then probably not. But will you know? Maybe, maybe not. So I think a lot of people don't put enough due diligence into studying the quality of the data that they're working with. Where did it come from? Who's touched it? You know, has it been transformed at all before I'm looking at it? And oftentimes that path of data provenance is obscured, and you can't, you know, always determine that. But back to you know, your original question about COVID, and I actually just wrote an article that's due for publication somewhere. I can't remember where. Specifically about that question is that, you know, when we build models with our data, machine learning models, you know, they are created using historical data, right? Things that happened in the past. So we make the assumption that, you know, what happened in the past will generally be reflective of what's going to happen in the near future. Now, I don't know. I think a lot of people think that when you build a machine learning model, that you put it into a production environment, it starts making inferences and predictions for whatever it's designed to. But eventually that model will deteriorate. The performance, the quality of the predictions will deteriorate because the world changes. You know, things that existed when you were making that model won't exist, or will be different, you know, 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a week after you put it into production, depending how fast your industry changes. So with something like COVID-19, where the entire, you know, the entire world essentially in some capacity has been, you know, disrupted, and the normalcy of, you know, people going to the store and buying groceries or going shopping or paying rent, all of these data sets are going to be impacted by this. And I'm not quite sure I know if there's really a solution to dealing with it at this point. You know, 2020, I almost feel like is going to be a year that is just going to have to be, you know, removed from the sense of the future. It's like we're going to have to go from 2019 to 2021, hopefully 2021. But, you know, when you start dealing with messy data like 2020 is surely going to create, I mean, even just trying to understand the impact of COVID-19 is entirely overly complicated. You know, the statistics, you know, you have different agencies reporting different numbers. The U.S. government, which, I mean, I don't even want to get into that, but, you know, obviously, you know, you don't know really who to believe or who to trust or what data is right. And everyone says we're using data. So, you know, the whole pandemic is just putting everything into a complete whirlpool where, you know, I don't know what's going to come out the other end. And I don't know if when we do go back to normal life, it most definitely won't be like normal life before 2020.
Gotcha.
There would be some things that are different, some things that are the same, but I feel like the people that are able to work with that data or are able to identify what's going to happen when we come out of this are going to be, financially in a position to make, lots of revenue, lots of profits. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, we'll see about COVID-19, but yeah, it's the data is, especially depending on what kind of company you're in, is going to be impacted without a doubt. And there's only so many transformations and imputations you can make on data before you're impacting the quality. And that's circles all the way back to where I started for the beginning of my current rant.
So, I mean, speaking of the data quality, what are some of the, the key things that you, or a piece of advice you would give to help people have good data quality?
Right. Well, I think it comes back to that data providence statement I made. Is first of all, data quality. It could be impacted by a number of things. It could be impacted by humans, either sometimes on purpose, sometimes accidentally. We're human. We all make mistakes. Data quality can be impacted by the tool or the device that it was collected with. If it's being collected by a IoT sensor. Or someone's Raspberry Pi weather station that they whipped up as their DIY project. There's only so much that you can know from the get-go, or from the data that you have at your disposal. So looking at data quality, for me, I think the recommendation that I would give is, if you're looking at a data set or you're looking at someone's analysis of data, I never take it as it's given to me. I don't assume that someone's trying to lie to me with data, but I always question the methodology, question the source of the data. Again, where's the path that the data came from where it was originally created, and can I look at that, right? Can I compare the data from where it was originally created to where it is right now in this current format that someone's giving it to me? And can I derive the same insights or statistics that they are myself using that same process? So I think, bullet point is never take data as perfect. Even when data is flawlessly collected, there's still chances that it's not correctly reflecting a given phenomena. Always accept that there's going to be some error. Bullet point number 2, there's always going to be, data's always messy, even from the source. Power outages could knock out your weather station and you didn't gather data for, a couple hours or something. So you have this big set of missing values in your data set. How do you deal with that? So, I think data quality is like I said, very important, often overlooked. But in terms of data quality, when you're looking at it in your organization, I would say try to find it at the source, rather than from the secondary source, or the tertiary third or fourth source that it passed through before it got to you.
Gotcha.
And it's always good to, and one of the things that I recommend to our clients is that data quality issues can be mitigated through automated processes built into the systems that we design for startups. So you might not be able to avoid bad quality data all the time, but if you know that something is wrong with your data right from the get-go, it gives you more opportunity to go in there and rectify the issue than just let it run, and then you have a data set that you have to throw away, just like 2020 data. We had to throw that away.
Awesome. So a couple of the things that you mentioned that I thought that stood out is when it comes down to companies transitioning and really maximizing their data. Like, a lot of times that companies either don't understand the value of the data they have, or whether it's top-down leadership or whether it's just that they just can't find the right talent to help, find the value in the data. And I also think there's just that data quality about having, I guess you say, proper frameworks or procedures in place to make sure that you are getting quality data so that the data can actually be useful for your business, which it brings me to a very important question is, when a potential customer wants to do business with your company, what types of services do you provide, and how does your services address those concerns?
Sure, sure. So the main product offering at Expected X is called Data Launch, and it's really a kind of a two-service approach wrapped into a bundled package. So essentially, we try to work with startups. Startups typically don't have any infrastructure in place. They have a product idea, maybe they have an MVP, or maybe they just have an idea that they want to work with, and they receive some angel investor, their mom or their dad or their rich Uncle Joe gave them some money to play with, and they're trying to build out their ideas. So a lot of times this kind of addresses that shortage in talent, is that sometimes these founders don't have the resources to implement the tech side of their business. So the first stage of our data launch is really called the data maturity wireframe. And essentially what we do is we walk a client through 25 separate process and capability areas, and identify kind of where they are right now, where they're lacking, and essentially come up with a plan of how do we fill the gaps. How do we move your company from, baseline, we have no infrastructure, no data talent, maybe we haven't even collected any data yet. How do we build that up in a graduated process through a series of levels that we identify? Typically, there's 5 levels that a startup can move as they achieve greater and greater data maturity. And we create a plan for them. Essentially over the course of, maybe about a month working together, or if they want to cram it all into, a week or, maybe an entire day, which I wouldn't recommend because most people's eyes start to cross when they talk about data for too long. So I don't want to cause any health issues, but essentially we create this plan. We touch on those 25 different process and capability areas. And this model that we use is actually derived from a model that was developed by Microsoft, Lockheed Martin, and Booz Allen Hamilton. So it's been used or developed by these major players and used internationally across tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of organizations. So we have the talent that exists within these major players, and now my organization allows startups to have access to that same, basically that same process.
Okay.
So when we create the model, the goal of creating that wireframe, that report with the recommendations and how we're going to basically move them from where they are now on a say a 3 to 5 year long-term plan. The goal of that is that they can take that to investors when they're seeking more investment or institutional investment, like their Series A, and we'll even sit at the table with them as the CTO or the CDO, I guess, Chief Data Officer, and help them present how they plan on working with their data, and then after they've achieved investment, hopefully, we can start to implement that plan. So that's kind of the second part of data launch, is now that we have the plan in place, we put the resources together. So, I pull in additional talent. We have a bullpen of consultants that we work with and match to our clients' projects very particularly for whatever their given needs are or their industry. And then we go at it and we implement that plan over the course of, say, 3 to 6 months, and then kind of exist in a true consulting role for as long as the client desires. But ultimately, our goal is to pass off what we do at Expected X to the client so that they can manage it. They're comfortable with data. They've gone from knowing nothing about data to being completely functioning and fully capable themselves. And then, we wave so long and send them on their way. So, it's, I think it's kind of a good model too, that we're able to put the right talent into place. So I'm the only full-time employee of Expected X. So the people that work on projects are all, contractors that I have worked with before. Well, I mean, I guess they all have to start somewhere, but we put them into those roles, and sometimes a client organization may even want to hire those individuals if they're not engaged in another role somewhere else. But it's good to be flexible, and we're a big proponent of the gig economy and remote working, which we've been a big fan of that since long before people started being, I guess, forced to work from home or work remotely. So people are geographically distributed wherever they are in the world. And, I think that's the best way to deal with talent nowadays is, they might not all be in your city or your state. They could be in Belarus or South Africa or India or, all points in between. So just find the right people to do the right job.
Awesome, awesome. And then where can people find you online, or where can they find you on social media?
Sure. So our website, obviously, expectedx.com, expected x.com, no space between Expected X. I'm always on LinkedIn, always contributing to LinkedIn. On Twitter as well. I think try to remember my handle on there, I think is just E as an elephant, SUKUP, and then the third, or I, because I'm John the Third. So I think that's on there. But all those are linked. If you go to the website or LinkedIn, I think there's links to all of those other sources. But try to regularly contribute to blogs as well. So Oracle's datascience.com. I write on there sometimes. I've written a couple of things. Well, one thing for now, a couple of things hopefully in the future for Forbes magazine, which is a pretty big thing. Hawaii Business Magazine is another source that I've written to. So yeah, I would say if you really want to connect with me, you probably just type my name into Google, and all those places will come up, and you might even see a picture of my dad, which hopefully you don't confuse for me, because being the third, I think he might have a picture on there too. But yeah, there's a lot of channels to get in touch with me on.
Gotcha. Now, before we wrap up, one question that I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about, your journey as an entrepreneur and running your business, what is one piece of advice that you would share to say, you know what, other entrepreneurs should embrace this piece of advice as well?
Right. Well, it's probably not original, my advice, but having gone through it, and everyone's journey is different. But I think you have to be very pervasive in what you're trying to accomplish. It took me. Expected X has been in business for about 5 years now, and I know most startups don't even last 1 year. And some people just give up. So I think, I didn't give up. And when things didn't work out the way that they, that I originally planned, and I think, I said at the beginning here, I started Expected X as a consumer market research organization that used data. And now we're not really doing that at all. So I think it to be consistent and pervasive. You can't give up. So, don't give up too soon. Maybe if you've been at it for 5 years and you haven't made any money, and then maybe that you not only do you need to not give up, but you also need to know when it's time to give up. So you kind of need to be selfless in the act as well. Is that you kind of have to put your ego aside and say, well, I thought it was a good idea. The market didn't agree with me. I'm going to shut things down and try again. So, keeping going, keeping consistent in what you're doing, and being flexible. Being able to pivot. Like I think I also said again, expected exits. We've pivoted maybe 3 or 4 times, maybe more like 3 times in the past 5 years as to what exactly we're trying to accomplish. So it's not something that everyone can do. And I've met entrepreneurs that they refuse to change what they want to do, and this is what they're going to do. And if it doesn't work out that way, then there's something wrong with everybody else. It's nothing's wrong with them. That's my advice.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for telling us about your company, your journey, and I think just the world of data, because as for everyone that's listening and watching, as we, continue to mature in technology and just our understanding, data will become an even more critical part of the business. So having the right processes, procedure, infrastructure, having the right mindset around data is very critical. So definitely Google John Sukup III and check out his articles that he's written, all of the contributions he's doing to different forums on LinkedIn. And John, thank you again so much for coming on the show. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.